Hello, and welcome to Without Fathom. I'm MacGuffen, and this is Daggerheart. Today's video is the start of a new sub-series where I'm overanalyzing various topics in Daggerheart with the hope that it can help create Homebrew as closely balanced to official content as possible, starting with weapons. Why start with weapons? Quantifiability. If all or most aspects of it are quantifiable, then it will all fit nicely on a spreadsheet. Weapons in Daggerheart are made of 9 values: tier, name, trait, range, damage die, damage bonus, damage type, burden, and feature. Name is just flavor, and everything else, except feature, can be simplified to a number or already is one. Though that is a lot of variables, if you look closely enough, it's pretty straightforward to see the connections. Tier, range, and burden determines the damage die and bonus, and the feature sometimes modifies those. The Homebrew kit was a good start in my analysis, but I found it is not consistent with all weapons. It does not list how each of the features alters a weapon. Here's my modified version of the weapon damage chart. If you're familiar with the Homebrew kit, you might notice some differences. Very close range has its own section, the addition of secondary weapons, and some of the numbers have been adjusted. While it makes absolute sense that secondary weapons would have their own set of numbers, the fact that very close, which is in between melee and close, has its own is surprising. In all cases, one-handed weapons made with the Homebrew kit will be weaker than those in the core rulebook, and two-handed, very close range weapons will be stronger. Not by a large amount, but small amounts can make a big difference in the right circumstances. And I feel the need to clarify, nothing in this video is intended to bash on the Homebrew kit, even though the video is treading the same ground. This is intended to provide my observations, so the time I put into making charts and noticing patterns can be useful to you, even if some of it contradicts the Homebrew kit. It's possible the patterns I'm seeing are the effect of the design team making individual decisions for each weapon, without the context of the decision-making process. Anyway, moving on. Using this chart, you can make any weapon you like, as long as it does not have a feature. As I said before, the tier, range, and burden determine the damage die and bonus. The trait and damage type don't really affect anything else, which leaves us with how to implement features. With features come modifications, in most cases. There are few features that do no modifications, but most will alter the damage die up or down a step or two, and or increase or decrease the damage bonus. While I could read out the alterations for each and every feature, that would not be enjoyable for anyone, so here's a list of all my findings. I will get to the secondary weapons soon, but first we should address a few things regarding that list. First, that these are me doing my best to deduce how they work. A lot of the features only appear on one weapon, or worse, appear on two with wildly different alterations. Some appear on several weapons, but have one or two that don't match the patterns. It's possible that there's a reason there are ones that don't fit, but I don't have enough information to determine why. A developer at Darrington Press decided to alter it that way, or it's a typo that just slipped through the cracks. As far as the ones that are inconsistent enough to not have clear info on the chart, reloading is chaotic. It's just so all over the place that I can't begin to tell how it's supposed to work. There are weapons that are identical except for the damage type that all have different damage bonuses. Maybe if we get more in a supplement in the future we can figure it out. But for now, not so much. Time Bending has 2 weapons, one far range and one close. The far range one has a +3 increase to its bonus, and the close range one has a -2 penalty to its bonus. Scary also appears on 2 weapons, and while most of the weapons values are different, the tier, damage die, and damage bonus are the same, when the latter 2 shouldn't be. One weapon seems to have no alteration, and the other has both the damage die and damage bonus changed. There are too many variables to determine which one could be making the difference. Versatile is 4 features in a trench coat, and has some theories as to why they get different modifications, but I'm not entirely sure. Even with all the work I put into this, there are still some weapons that don't fit the pattern. Some of them are likely errors, like the legendary dual staff, which uses a different damage die than all the other dual staffs. Or dual staves? There are 3 weapon sets that have the cumbersome trait: spears, halberds, and longbows. 2 that seem to match perfectly fine, and one that has a larger damage die than it seems like it should. At first I thought it should go with the 2 that had no change, and considered the other one a mistake, or that they decided it needed more power. The lone Beast Feast weapon that has that feature also supported this, but the SRD errata removed cumbersome from the spears and lowered the damage die. I can't help but think that this means the cumbersome weapons are supposed to get a boost to the damage die, especially since the feature is, itself, a penalty, and has no benefit without the damage die boost. The errata also gives it a boost to its damage die bonus, which I'm not sure where that's coming from. I can't prove this theory, but I'm throwing it out there. There are quite a few others that don't match the patterns, whether they off from the base stats or the feature modifications. I'll list the weapons that I think are off here. Next, we move on to the secondary weapons. Offhand weapons that aren't meant to be your main means of attacking, but grant a buff to your main weapon, or serve as an emergency range weapon for those with shorter range weapons. They all have base damage die of d6, regardless of range, and a slower damage bonus progression, before being modified accordingly by their feature. A few of the secondary weapon features scale with tier. Barrier, Paired, and Protective all grant a bonus that increases, either granting a bonus that is equal to or one higher than the tier to armor score or to damage when you hit an enemy within melee range with your primary weapon. Strangely enough, Protective does not function the same on a primary weapon, only granting a +1 bonus on the third tier weapon it appears on. To make things easier, all the secondary weapons do match the patterns. Phew. Now that we've covered the core weapons, we can move on to the campaign frame specific weapons. From fewest to most, first is Motherboard. Motherboard has the Iconis, which every character gets, and comes in 5 varieties, 1 for each range. All but one of those does not fit with the previously mentioned patterns, but since they exist in isolation from the rest of the game's weapons, I don't really have a reason to say they are wrong necessarily, just unique to that world. Though if you or a player in your game wants to pull an Iconis into another world to explore the mechanics of it, consider how the weapons are different from the other similar weapons, and also how augments might give that character an advantage over the others. Next, we have the Colossus of the Drylands weapons, 5 sets with distinct features, 3 primary and 2 secondary. The primary weapons are all pretty straightforward, but the secondary weapons either have a modification that scales with tier, or the damage bonus just scales differently than core secondary weapons. I wouldn't be opposed to these weapons being in another setting, as there are already guns among the core weapons. And finally, we have Beast Feast. The weapons in this frame are all first tier, and a good portion of them are renamed copies of the core weapons. 11 of them, however, are completely unique. All these unique weapons are slightly weaker than the patterns would make them, so if someone wanted to use any of these weapons, it should be fine. That gives you enough information to make any possible weapon with most of the existing features, which brings us to the most subjective part of making homebrew weapons, how to balance your homebrew features. I wish I had another chart to give a straightforward answer of how to perfectly balance a feature, but as I said at the start of the video, it's the one thing that isn't easily quantifiable. At best, all you can do is compare it to whatever is the closest one and use that as a guide. There are a few trends. Features that allow you to hit multiple targets reduce the damage die, and things that reduce trait or evasion increase it. Features that allow you to deal more damage or buff yourself lower the damage bonus. Features that increase the damage bonus are pretty good by themselves, so maybe use that sparingly. The last thing I'll add is limitations. I suspect that some of the features are limited to weapons with certain ranges, traits, damage types, burdens, or a combination of several of those. When using an existing feature, check to see if all the official weapons that use it are all the same range, or they're all two-handed. Heavy and massive weapons are all two-handed, physical damage, strength trait, and melee ranged. Similarly, when making your own feature, think about what type of weapon makes sense for it to be on. Well, I think that just about covers everything you could want to know about Daggerheart weapons, and probably a good deal more. Please leave a comment if you'd like to discuss something, or ask a question. Be sure to like the video, and definitely subscribe if you want to see more Daggerheart videos. Until next time, have a great day. Bye!